Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Understanding Nutrition. We'll continue on with an exploration of next group of nutrients, and those are uh, water and the major minerals. Okay, make sure that you're reading text, taking notes, diving into our mind tap exercises, undistracted and effective learning. Here we'll quickly go over highlights in this PowerPoint. PowerPoint is also shared on Blackboard. Okay, water and body fluids make up what percent on average of adult body? That's pretty high. It's average of 60%. It varies among peoples, and that's regarding what percent lean tissue we are. It's lean tissue 75%, and uh, compared to 25% fat. So that, of course, we vary quite a bit. Uh, our sex, our body composition, our age, etc. So why is water very important to our bodily fluids? Well, they carry nutrient and waste through the body. They maintain the structure of large molecules, like all the various protein molecules, such as muscle and antibodies and cell membranes, anything you might think of. They participate in metabolic reactions, uh, serve as the major solvent or where reactions take place in all our metabolic processes. They act as a cushion, as a lubricant. They aid in temperature regulation, along with our adipose and to some extent our lean tissue as well. And they maintain, very importantly, the body blood volume. Okay, a little matching here. Intracellular, well, that's inside the cell, kind of self-explanatory. Interstitial, that's surrounding the cells. You got to know those terms. Extracellular, that's outside the cells, and intravascular, that's fluid in vessels. And there's a quick diagram of where those fluids are. Think about that with regard to the balance that we have to keep. And what is that balance important about? What is keeping extra vascular volume maintained at the right proportions? Why is that important? Electrolytes. These are we can call them all salts. When we think of salts, it's not just table salt to a certain chloride. A salt is when in aqueous media or in water, um, uh, dissociates into ions, and those are charged particles. Cations, positive, anions, negatives, these are electrolytes. They're important to maintain balance of charges around the body, inside, outside of cells. Electrolytes also very importantly attract water. They actually help water move um, inside, outside, across membranes. Solutes act to attract the water. So we'll see an example there. And the chemical word that you need to know, the chemical process, osmosis. This is the movement of water across a membrane. Proteins are very much involved also. They also, like electrolytes, attract water. And that's mainly because of the charged portions of these proteins, larger molecules. Edema, that's an attraction, or we might see this as swelling, attraction of water at a particular spot for some reason. usually associated with an imbalance. Here's a little diagram of what we're talking about here. See on the left, water molecule, oxygen and two hydrogens, and you see the charges, that's called partial charge, around the molecule. Around the hydrogens is positive, and around the oxygen is negative, and that's to do with their ability to attract electrons. Oxygen much stronger in its electron capturing ability or electronegativity as compared to the hydrogens. Now we look at the electrolytes on the right. Main electrolytes, well, here we see sodium and chloride, and you see how the water molecules associate or interact with parts of these cations, shown as the sodium, and the chloride ions, the anion, negative. You see how they associate and move them around and attract water. When a raisin is placed inside a bowl, think about what happens there. Water moves which way? Outside, out of the raisin, or into the raisin? And think about why that happens. Well, water would move into the raisin. Why is that? There's more particles, or a higher concentration inside. And in all of chemistry, what pushes chemistry to a large extent is to reach an equilibrium, or to lower the overall energy of a system. So this is because the solute, in this case in the raisin, sugar concentration inside the raisin is higher compared to the surrounding water. So water wants to move to try to equilibrate the concentrations of inside and outside of the raisin in this case. This is an example of osmosis. Water moves from an area of low solute concentration to high in its quest to reach equilibrium, or lower the overall energy of a system. That's what happens naturally. Here's an example of a typical way that we describe osmosis. On the left, far left, we have equilibrium in some kind of a container, and that's water and some kind of solute particle, and it's separated by a semi-permeable membrane that is only allowing water to move back and forth, and not the small particles. And if we add more particles in image 2 to the B side, then water will move across the semipermeable membrane to try to equilibrate, or to reach an equal concentration. So it will move across the semipermeable membrane to reach equilibrium, and that's what happens in that case, and that's osmosis. We regulate. How do we regulate? Well, we work using this chemical phenomenon. Fluids in our blood maintain a given volume and pressure, and a lot of this is regulated by our kidneys and some mechanisms that work. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's just the volume of urine and the concentration. And here's the hormone that's involved, the antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. And this works to conserve water, stimulates the kidneys to reabsorb water from the lower intestine for the most part. It's released from the hypothalamus, and stimulates the pituitary gland. So a lot of things, messengers, and that's what hormones do. They're released from some point to interact with or signal something else to happen somewhere else. And these events also trigger thirst. So we have retention of water, retention of solute, in all to increase absorption of water. It helps to restore homeostasis. Okay, the kidneys are central in regulating blood volume, which in turn influences blood pressure. They do this by adjusting the urine volume and concentration. The ADH is released in response to dehydration and thus stimulates water to be reabsorbed by the kidneys. So, nice little summary there. Okay, there's a few more things involved we want to know about. Renin is the enzyme released by the kidneys, and this occurs when blood pressure is low. The renin um, causes sodium to be reabsorbed, and we know that the ion sodium will attract water, so that accompanies the reabsorption of water into our body from the intestine. Angiotensin 2 is also a powerful vasoconstrictor, constricting vessels, and this raises the blood pressure. This is in when the body is sensing low pressure, blood pressure, and is required to convert angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. So a bunch of mechanisms involved there, and that's what enzymes and hormones are all about, maintaining homeostasis. Angiotensin 2 also stimulates the release of aldosterone. This hormone signals the kidneys to excrete potassium and retain sodium. This in turn stimulates the retention of water. So a bunch of things going on here. Look at the diagram here, refer to this in the text, or just stop the video here and inspect this and think about all the things going on here, organ systems involved, and where things take place. So this is how the body will regulate blood volume and in turn blood pressure. See what we described just now, all shown here in this figure. And when there's an imbalance, sodium is indiscriminately could be lost by vomiting or diarrhea. This is throwing off the body's homeostasis. And in these cases, um, and other electrolyte imbalance, these are could be from heavy sweating, burns, traumatic wounds. Medical intervention. This depends on the circumstances surrounding the losses, and ORT. This stands for a recipe for restoring electrolyte imbalance. And what this is oral rehydration therapy. It's a good thing to remember. And roughly a mixture of 4 teaspoons of sugar, a half a teaspoon of salt, in a 1/2 liter. Okay, another very important balance when we're talking about fluids in the body, and that's acid base. The body ions help to regulate acidity. Acidity equates to a low pH, something below 7, 7 being neutral, above 7 being alkaline. The body systems work properly when a narrow range of pH is maintained. The deviations can, at least initially, start to denature proteins. And when proteins get denatured, we start to lose the mechanisms that keep our body in check. For instance, enzymes and hormones and uh, membranes and other various things. High concentration of hydrogen ions is acidic, and a low concentration of these ions is basic. Basic above pH 7, acidic below pH 7, 7 being neutral. There are three systems that we have in our body that resist large changes in the pH, and these are generally called buffers. These can neutralize acids or bases. And the buffers in our body, the first main one is carbonic acid. It's called just carbonate or bicarbonate equilibrium. And we could do this in various ways. We naturally produce bicarbonate. You might remember from digestion, we have bicarbonate to neutralize the stomach acid. And coming out of the stomach, all that acid digestion going on when it comes into the duodenum, we produce bicarbonate in fluids and put into the duodenum to neutralize. And that's from pancreas, assisted with, accompanied by enzymes to continue digestion. In this case, bicarbonate can be produced in other places to maintain the body's pH. Another way is respiration in the lungs, increase or decrease pH. If we increase the amount of decrease the amount of CO2 in our body, and that might be from hyperventilation. We could increase the pH if our body senses us going below or out of the narrow pH range. Another way is excretion in the kidneys. Bicarbonate is excreted, and the urine acidity can fluctuate to maintain or bring us back into that narrow pH range that the body normally works in. This shows the very important bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer system. And you may or may not understand the chemistry here. It's good to have an idea of what goes on. This is a very important buffer system, not only in our body, but also in the environment, maintaining ecosystems at various at a optimal pH. Just a side note, increase of CO2 from increased CO2 in our atmosphere above normal going into water aqueous system, water systems will start increasing. That's why you hear about the tale of increasing and the measured increasing of pH, increasing acidity of our ocean systems, which is very dangerous and could disrupt normal systems and wildlife in the oceans by increased CO2 being absorbed by ocean systems. So water balance and losses, a minimum of half a liter or 500 milliliters of water is excreted naturally to excrete waste on average. This is, we need to excrete this in urine to get rid of just natural wastes. For instance, ammonia that's converted to urea, we need to get rid of that. Other wastes in the body need to be excreted on a regular basis. Beyond these losses, excretion also just need to be adjusted with intake. So the losses also depend on environmental conditions, for instance, temperature and humidity. Daily losses can be a total of 2,500 milliliters on average. So when we look at, and that's about equivalent to 10 cups of water. So our body senses through our thirst and satiety, sensors in our mouth, through our hypothalamus and nervous system, when we're feeling dehydrated or thirsty, and when we're in fine shape. And these are systems to sense this dehydration. We can have, yes, we can have too much water, and that's water intoxication. Rare, but it can happen. One gross way uh, to see about our water balance would be a color of urine. Might be hard to detect, but you see a scale there on the right. Signs of dehydration very important because even if a 1 to 2% loss of body weight for loss of fluids or water can start to affect us. 3 or 4% might impair performance. 5 to 6%, even more impairment. And when we get into the getting close to 10% loss of body weight from loss of liquids, we could be in lots of trouble. Okay, so which of these is correct about water sources? Water is the main source. That is just drinking liquid water. Water, fruits, and vegetables are the only source. Water, other foods, metabolism, and beverages provide water, and that's the right answer. We get from, yes, drinking water that's in beverages. Foods are made up of various percentages, sometimes the majority of the mass of uh, foods are made of water. Metabolism, our normal metabolism, produces some amount of water at the end. You might recall, the end of the electron transport system, we do make water as we're making our ATP. Okay, so we need to maintain this water balance. Here's kind of a rough calculations of input of water sources and water losses there. And at the end of the day, we want to be somewhere around in equilibrium here. An example is a list of some foods of where the percentage by mass that they're made up of, from water to practically nothing in things like crackers and oils and sugars. Okay, so water, the adequate intake, roughly 2 to 3 liters of water. That's 8 to 12 cups per day. And of course, it varies among people with regard to their body composition, their sweating and breathing, and other factors. And very important health effects on maintaining maintaining balance, water balance. Okay, minerals. These are inorganic substances. They are not destroyed. Um, not destroyed by any conditions of heat, air, acid, or mixing that we'd normally experience under ambient or normal conditions. Some foods contain binders that impacts the availability of these minerals. Two examples are phthalates and oxalates that occur in foods of plant origin. So very important to remember that little phenomenon. Similar to vitamins, excess minerals can create an inadequacy um, of another. So they do interact. For instance, supplements are often blamed for creating a potential imbalance of other nutrients if we have some in excess. Calcium. You probably would have guessed that. Calcium making up most of our bone mass is the major mineral in the body, along with phosphorus, potassium, etc. And then the trace minerals. So for sodium, rolls the principal, it's a principal cation, positive ion in extracellular fluids, helps maintain acid base, um, involved in nerve impulse transmission, and sodium travels freely along with other um, ions in the blood. Kidneys, we talked about this, filtering out or maintaining the amounts of sodium. Sodium deficiency is rare. Might think of why. We're usually concerned about getting too much sodium in our eating pattern. High sodium is correlated with hypertension. Because of this, the upper level is 2,300 milligrams. It's advisable to be lower than that. We'll see some numbers here, and it's estimated 90% of Americans exceed sodium recommendations, and we all can think of that, and we should be wary in looking at our plates and whatever we're consuming with regard to how much sodium intake we have on a normal basis. Sodium is that's about a teaspoon a day. It's advisable to be much lower than that. Uh, Table salt, sodium chloride. This provides, yes, important to have sodium and chloride ions, but not in excess. Hypertension and prehypertension are recommended to consume less than 1,500 milligrams a day. So that'd be closer to half a teaspoon. Good to think about that. It's a good visual. And one eating pattern established is the DASH diet to have lowered sodium intake. And that's an acronym for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, established back in the 60s at the Mayo Clinic. Okay, high sodium, also another problem with high sodium is could lose to osteoporosis toward excess bone loss, which is hard to reverse, and that can occur with high salt intake over long periods of time. Because it increases excretion of calcium. And so potassium is a protective factor. We'll see in a moment. We'd like to have more potassium than sodium in our eating pattern. I mentioned DASH diet recommendation. And where do we get excess sodium? A lot from processed foods. Nice graphic here from the book, unprocessed along the top. You can see the balance between sodium in purple or pink, potassium in the pinkish purple, and sodium in the orangish color there. As we process food like milk into pudding, or roast beef into chopped beef, or corn into canned corn, we're starting to change the ratio, in some cases drastically, between potassium and sodium. The processed foods, higher ratio of sodium. We'd rather have the other way around, higher potassium. Extreme cases, a drop of a drop in blood sodium levels causes hypo or low sodium. That's can happen. And we mentioned a few cases earlier, such as vomiting and diarrhea. Uh, using an using an ultra endurance athlete as an example, sweating causes excess sodium and water excretion, and if too much water is consumed, the above condition can develop as well. Acute cases of excess sodium are edema, mentioned that, and edema could also lead to high blood pressure. That is swelling around vessels, increasing pressure. Prolonged excessive sodium contributes to hypertension. Okay, chloride, it's also essential. You can think of where that is, has a major role. Also balancing, that's the anion, the negative cation, extracellular fluids, maintains our electrolyte balance. It's also part of the HCl, hydrochloric acid, that important component in the stomach, helping digest protein, also involved with intrinsic factor and absorption of vitamin B12. It's also abundant in processed foods, although its recommendation is not as strong to keep low as the sodium is. Deficiencies and toxicities, it's rarely lacking. Okay, we move on to potassium, principal intracellular cation, has important roles in helps maintain, again, electrolyte balance, helps maintain cell integrity, and also involved in nerve impulse transmission and muscle contraction. It's usually abundant in our cells, but and processing cells, for instance, in processed foods, could destroy the amount of potassium present, whether that's in foods or in our body. Therefore, fresh foods are the richest form of potassium. The adequate amounts is 4,700 milligrams per day. Diets low in potassium raise blood pressure. So that's that interaction between potassium and sodium. To meet potassium needs, people should consume more fresh fruits and vegetables. Deficiency character, and this is potassium. Lots of eating patterns put us in deficiency of potassium. For instance, we saw that in the highly processed foods, lowering the potassium contents and increasing the sodium ratio. It tends to increase blood pressure, kidney stones, higher bone turnover if deficiency progresses, irregular heartbeats, muscle weakness, glucose intolerance could follow. There's no upper limit, so overconsumption of these salts, not necessarily dangerous. Kidneys accelerate the excretion. However, it could be that at some levels potassium could affect normal heartbeat, and it's also used therapeutically to stimulate the heart in rare cases. Okay, so some foods you can see here, the green lines, vegetables, also in fruits, and way at the bottom, some excellent sources. We have squash, soybean, and artichoke. Calcium, most abundant mineral. Very important to have on a regular basis. Um, Bioavailable calcium helps maintain bone health. Majority is of a calcium, that highest mineral by weight in our body, in bones and teeth. Uh, Calcium also helps to maintain normal blood pressure, an important cation. Extracellular participates also in blood clotting. Intracellular uh, interacts with proteins, activates them in some cases, regulates muscle contraction, and a number of other very important interactions of this mineral. Calcitonin is released when blood calcium is high. What effect does calcitonin have on vitamin D and the kidneys? Think about that. Parathyroid hormone. This is what stimulates vitamin D activation and absorption. So we know that this interaction, we learned this in last chapter about the importance of calcium interacting with vitamin D, and it's the osteoclast cells release calcium into the blood, and the PTH raises the levels. We see that here. Look closely at this this diagram, very important. We have several organ systems involved, hormones, and calcium and vitamin D. And to maintain homeostasis of calcium and other systems, calcitonin and PTH are the hormones involved. Very important to maintaining our blood calcium levels and keeping bones healthy. So bone peaks after active growth and in adolescence to adulthood, and then bone loss can occur at various levels as people go through adulthood. Okay, calcium present um, uh, in some protein sources such as fish, sardines in particular, some vegetables, and of course dairy. Osteoporosis, it's becoming fragile bones. It's a silent disease because it's slow in its oncoming and not no obvious signals to them of that, except unfortunate fall and fragile bones could have breaks. It also can be detected and more becoming common to at a certain age. To have tests such as a DEXA scan to see about our bone status. Bone mass peaks late 20s. Bone loss begins 30 to 40 and later. Osteopenia, this is the onset possibly of long-term bone loss and fragility. Osteopenia could lead to osteoporosis, which is very difficult, as I said, to reverse. Okay, phosphorus, second most abundant mineral in the body. Hydroxyapatite. These are the crystals that are formed in bone and teeth with phosphorus and calcium. Roles of phosphorus in the body. It's also part of buffer systems. It's makes up. It's component, part of RNA and DNA, assists in energy, of course. ATP is a phosphorus-containing molecule, helps in transport um, along transport of lipids and those lipoproteins. It's a structural component of membranes. Deficiencies are unlikely, fortunately. Phosphorus, protein-rich foods, variety of them is good intake of phosphorus. So a variety of good sources and a well-balanced, variety-filled eating pattern. Magnesium, again, like a few other minerals we talked about, make up important parts of our bones. Bones serve as a reservoir for this important um, mineral, and its roles maintain bone health, important in energy production of ATP. It's involved with muscle contraction, blood clotting, along with that vitamin K. Supports normal function of immune systems. Good sources: legumes, seeds, nuts, leafy vegetables. And so the recommendations of intake might be affected by other conditions, other chronic diseases and inflammation. Deficiencies rare. It's thought to be protective against hypertension. Hard water. Hard water means mineral-filled water. It's with some of these minerals we just are discussing: magnesium, calcium, and some sources, good sources of magnesium in foods. Some fish, nuts, and some vegetables. So varied diets. Okay, sulfate, not really a mineral, but more an ion, but it's grouped in along with minerals, and that's its formula right there. SO4 2 minus. It's an ion. It's a polyatomic ion in terms of its chemical description. Why is it important? It's an important part of amino acids, methionine and cysteine. These and some of the non-essential amino acids that we produce in our body. There's no recommendation. Recommended intake, the normal protein intake is usually satisfactory. And there's a highlight here that important to go through, and then just osteoporosis and its importance, and where does that come in? Why is it a silent kind of chronic disease? And very important. So here's the bone structure. So please look at these on your own. I want to finish up here in a timely manner. Could stop the video to inspect these a little more closely. So dietary nutrients summary that we've spoken about. Calcium, so important, especially in the growing years. Adequate protein, we've heard that throughout. Vitamins, the fat-soluble vitamins, and vitamin C, very important. Interactions with the minerals. Overall, dietary adequacy, very important. And supplements may be necessary. Supplements might, in small amounts, fine. But if some supplements can can disrupt absorption or balance of others, so be cautious about supplements. And we'll stop right here in this segment.